Big move coming for your Golden State Warriors. That's what ESPN's Brian Windhorst has to say, as there's a couple of players around the NBA trade rumor mill that Golden State has their eyes on, and we're going to discuss all that on today's show. But before we do, guys, if you want to go live for the NBA trade deadline, which is less than 1 week away, next Thursday, you got to subscribe to the channel. If you're a diehard Golden State Warriors fan, you'll love what we got going on here at Warriors Today. And we got to get to 71,500 subscribers here on the channel, or else my boss has said we can't have a live stream on trade deadline day. So if you guys want coverage all day long on February 6th, make sure you hit that sub button. What's going on, Dub Nation? You're watching Warriors Today by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Tyler Smith, and this is an interesting video today, right? Because as we've known throughout this trade cycle for Golden State, they don't want to make a big splash move that derails their future and give away all these future assets. Dunleavy said it. Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Steve Kerr have all agreed that they want to preserve the future and not make a huge trade that potentially jeopardizes that. And with the Golden State Warriors sitting at 23-23 right now, coming off a big win over the OKC Thunder, they could be shredding back a little bit and actually going and trying to make a big splash move. Here's what Windhorst had to say in the full quote. He said, "I'm telling you, in the last few days, I hear the Warriors are dipping their toes back in the trade market to make a significant move, and just not necessarily for some of the names you've heard of in the past. I think everybody is kind of riding the fence here, not sure which way this team goes." What's going on in Golden State? Because we're hearing conflicting reports here as this trade cycle has developed and heated up. I mean, the Jimmy Butler stuff was gone one day and back another. Zach LaVine was gone in August. Now he's back again. Nikola Vucevic was here a couple weeks ago. Now he might not be here again. Like, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of conflicting stories happening right now, but it seems like Golden State is going to try to make a big move at the deadline. Anthony Slater, The Athletic, with this. He said the Warriors have also floated a protected version of their 2025 first-round pick around the NBA as a potential sweetener. So if they're floating this thing around, then that means they're going to try to acquire a big-time player. They wouldn't be giving up a first-round pick if they were just going and acquiring some rotational guy that didn't make all that much of a difference. They didn't give any first-round pick away for Dennis Schroeder, so that makes me think that if they are going to give away a first, even if it is protected, maybe lottery or top 10, then they're going to make a big player move. More from Slater here. He said the protection and the timing of the pick is important. League sources say the Warriors aren't necessarily enamored with the prospects predicted to land in the back end of the first round, so losing a pick in the late teens for even a valuable rotation piece could be plenty worth it. Once it conveys, they retain full control of their 2026 first rounder for any possible deals this summer. If it didn't convey, that would mean the Warriors tumbled into the lottery and retained a high-value draft pick in a top-loaded draft that could either be moved or used. The downside is relatively minimal. This is why you subscribe to Golden State Warriors Today, because I literally said this like yesterday. The Warriors, as far as first-round picks should go, they should only trade that 2025 first. And I even had a trade idea a couple days ago where they put a protection on that first. I pay attention to this team, guys. Like, I promise you, I'm not just trying to spew any nonsense to you. I just try to give it to you straight. And I try to report what's going on around your Golden State Warriors. And if they want to make a big-time deal for, say, a Jimmy Butler, say a Zach LaVine, they would have to surrender a first-round pick. Could be that protected first. Could be unprotected if these teams on the other side are driving a high bargain. But I think that Golden State floating this idea around could potentially bring more teams who are willing to deal certain players on their rosters to Golden State to call up and make a trade potentially. And as far as what Golden State's locked in on right now, Bill Simmons, he thinks it's a Jimmy Butler trade. As far as all of the Butler suitors out there, Simmons, I was listening to his podcast last night, and he was kind of adamant that Golden State was the place for Jimmy Butler. But that hasn't always been the case, right? Because when Butler really started making waves in the Miami Heat locker room and was kind of becoming a nuisance, that he didn't want to play there anymore, Golden State wasn't in that original group of suitors. Obviously, they were speculated on at the start, but once these reports kind of came out, Golden State kind of quickly took themselves out of the discussion. Anthony Slater on January 4th said that Golden State is not a viable option for Butler. Fast forward to January 27th, and the Heat suspend Jimmy Butler for the second time this season, and the trade price, according to sources in Miami, has decreased for Jimmy Butler. 2 days later than that, We get another article from Anthony Slater that there is a quote-unquote noticeable increase in intrigue in making a Jimmy Butler trade, albeit for a bargain. Like this price has driven down. Golden State maybe wouldn't have to give up a guy like Jonathan Kuminga in a deal for Butler, or maybe one or the other, Kuminga or the first. I would pump the brakes on Kuminga. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But I am concerned a little bit because, according to some other reports, Steph, Steve, Draymond might not think that Jimmy Butler is the best idea to go out there and trade for. Kevin O'Connor of Yahoo Sports said this. He said, my league sources say Stephen Curry specifically has concerns about Jimmy Butler's fit in the locker room, personality-wise, and Steve Kerr shares these feelings. While I've not heard Draymond Green also share these concerns, it is interesting that on his own podcast, he went out there and talked about it, detailing the challenges of trading for Butler's $48 million salary. And that echoes the concerns that Warriors front office would have with everything they'd have to give up to go get Butler. I mean, I don't know if I came up with this take here because I was talking to a couple of other people here at Chat Sports who I sent that tweet to them, that quote from Kevin O'Connor, and they said that it was all smoke. They said if the mouths are moving, then it's a smoke screen, that they actually are saying this because they want the price to be driven down even more for a Jimmy Butler trade, and they actually do want him to come and compete. I could be wrong, but it doesn't. There's so many conflicting reports right now. It seems to me that the insiders with team sources and league sources, they believe that Golden State is going to pursue a Jimmy Butler trade heavily. And what could that trade look like? I think what we've heard about a Butler trade over the past couple of weeks is that this could be a mega deal involving multiple teams. And here is just a quick look, kind of something according to what Simmons was talking about on his podcast. Because if you look in the bottom left corner, Jonathan Kuminga is involved in this deal. I don't necessarily think that he is going to be involved in a Jimmy Butler deal if it does get done. But as far as salaries go, this is kind of how it would have to happen. It would be very difficult for Golden State to go out there and just trade 1-1 Heat and Warriors for Jimmy Butler to come to Golden State. It would be very difficult. I tried a bunch of different possibilities. Trading Moses Moody away in the deal is not easy at all, especially for a team like the Heat, who's hard capped at the aprons as well. Now, going back to Kevin O'Connor here, he said that if Butler isn't traded to the Golden State Warriors, it should surprise no one that they hold on to the assets that they have for the future and then commit to the young players that they have in tow and keep all of their draft capital as well. So it could happen, it could not happen. It's only time will tell, and we will find out before February 6th at 3 o'clock Eastern. I believe that's when the trade deadline is officially up and gone. Let me know in the comment section, though. Be honest for me. Is a Jimmy Butler trade worth it? Forget about that idea I just showed you. Is it worth it considering what they would definitely have to give up in Andrew Wiggins and a couple other salary players and maybe that protected first as well? Type Y for yes, type N for no. I'm trying to hear what Dub Nation has to say. Next up, two more players on Golden State's trade radar. Talked about one of them a little bit before, and we've talked about the other one a lot on this channel, but he might not be looking like the best option or the most wanted option for this front office. That in a second, but first, I got to give a major shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports platform with over 10 million active members. It's daily fantasy made easy. Watch your favorite sports, win real money in real time. And when you use our promo code CLNS, Prize Picks is going to hook you guys up with a free $50 in your account when you place your first $5 entry. You might be asking me, Tyler, how do you even place an entry on Prize Picks? Super simple. Pick 2 or more players. Put them in a lineup. Pick more or less, and then you're there. And you can watch your sports, and then you can win some money. It's so easy. And they're always trying to hook you up with incredible deals other than the free $50 that we're telling you guys about on today's show. They got Taco Tuesday, where they give you discounted stat projections. They give you Flex Friday, where if you lose your lineup, they'll give it back to you in promo funds. And they even got like specialty picks for big-time games. And the big game is coming up next week. They got Patrick Mahomes more than half a passing yard. So if you paired this up with any other pick that you wanted on Prize Picks, they got football, basketball, baseball around the corner, hockey, esports, college sports. They got it all. Pair it up with one other player, you're already halfway to winning 3 times your money on Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use our promo code CLNS for $50 instantly when you place your first $5 entry. You don't even need to win to receive the $50. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. All that information is clickable down in the comment section and description of today's video. So if it's not Jimmy Butler, because Golden State is keeping their options open, we know this. If it's not Jimmy Butler, is there a trade out there for Golden State to make? The team that we've been hearing about over the past couple of weeks is the Chicago Bulls. And the two players that we've been hearing about on that roster are Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine, as recently as like yesterday when we figured out that the Warriors are looking back at a Zach LaVine trade after previously being completely out on him as recent as this past offseason. According to multiple reports, on a LaVine or Vooch trade, Golden State has had significant discussions on both of them. That comes from Casey Johnson, who is a big-time Bulls reporter, as well as Brett Siegel, who is a Clutch Points NBA insider. They've had significant discussions. Is Zach LaVine the safer option to go with than Jimmy Butler? He's undeniably cheaper. His $43 million salary is much easier to go out there and match up with than it is Butler. So I like Zach LaVine as a player. I mean, he's not incredibly a big player. Like, he's not somebody you're going to plug and play on defense. But what does Golden State need badly on this roster right now? Secondary scoring next to Stephen Curry. Here's more from Anthony Slater. I know we talked about LaVine yesterday, but here's kind of a little bit more details of what Slater had to say. So after pulse-taking conversations with multiple players, it seems like Zach LaVine might pique more interest than Jimmy Butler, depending on his cost. Big depending on there. There is some understanding and alignment from all levels of the Warriors organization that they lack a true second scorer next to Curry, and LaVine's explosive three-level scoring ability would fill the roster's largest void. And you think about the beginning of that quote right there. Depending on his cost, Zach LaVine, with the way that he's playing this season, he could cost more than Jimmy Butler. Although, maybe a lot of teams are scared off of his contract, which is $43 million this year, $45, $46 million next year, $48, $49 million player option the season that follows. But you can't deny that Zach LaVine is a baller, man. And he's having a heck of a season. He's proving that he's worth the money that he's paid. 24 points a game. Does anybody score 24 points a game in the Warriors? I don't even think Steph is at 24 a night this year. He's doing his job on the glass and in the playmaking game as well. And, I mean, 45% from three-point range. Like, how do you even – like, come on. And this is not a high volume, too. This is like heavy pull-up threes. And he's pushing still 45% from deep. Zach LaVine is a masterful scorer. He's having a heck of a bounce-back year after suffering a pretty significant injury in 23-24. What would a trade for LaVine look like, though? It would have to include Wiggins. Again, like a Butler trade would. Andrew Wiggins makes too much money, $26.5 million. And then you include the expiring contracts of Gary Payton II and Kevon Looney. Put a first-round pick in there with that protection. Remember, this graphic was made yesterday before we even heard about the Golden State floating this protected first round. I have you guys. Protected first. Maybe 1 through 10, maybe lottery protected. Doesn't matter. What we do know is that Jonathan Kuminga is off the table. He is not being included in a Zach LaVine trade. He is not being included in a Jimmy Butler trade as well. That's coming from Slater. And Slater's the most tapped-in guy with the Golden State Warriors. What he says, I take as law. And if Jonathan Kuminga, he says, is not being included in these talks, then Jonathan Kuminga is not being included in these talks. So I'm cool with that. If Golden State can get one of those guys without having to give him away, I'm all for it. And if you don't trade Kuminga, you're also committing to paying him long-term. You're committing to having him as a building block on this team for years to come. He's going to be commanding $30+ million in free agency this offseason. So if you don't trade him now, then what are you going to do in July when a team offers him 30+? You're going to match it, or you're just going to let him walk for nothing as a 22-year-old? I would say you have to pay him. So if you don't trade him now, that means he's going to be a part of this team for years to come. Let's go back to this trade real quick, though. Would you guys accept it? Now that you know Kuminga's nowhere going to be near involved in a Zach LaVine trade, would you accept it? Type A for accept, type D for decline. More from Slater here on Nikola Vucevic. Says, I know we've talked about that they were at the forefront of a Vucevic trade for the longest time. Now it doesn't seem like that's at the top of their priority list from Slater. So the acquisition of a stretch center also remains on their radar, though further down the priority list. Wonder who's been saying this for the longest time, that Golden State's biggest need is secondary scoring next to Steph. I don't know, maybe a guy wearing glasses and wearing a St. Bonaventure pullover on Warriors today. Is this the backup plan for Golden State? I mean, I always thought that this, if what Dunleavy was saying was true and Steph Draymond Kerr was saying was true and not making a splash trade where you have to throw away a bunch of future assets, I thought Vucevic would be their top priority this trade season, but it seems like he's becoming more of the backup plan as Golden State thinks that they can take themselves over the top with a big-time second option like a Jimmy Butler or a Zach LaVine. It would be easy to get to the salary of Vucevic as well. You wouldn't have to give up Wiggins. You'd have to give up some expiring contracts. Yeah, guys who contribute a lot to your identity, but at the end of the day, are they going to be long-term pieces? And at some point, you kind of have to consider talent over fit. Vucevic, he's got talent. No doubt about it. I am a little sad. His numbers, every time we put them back up on screen, they are going down a little bit. So is he kind of feeling the heat of being traded there in Chicago? Perhaps, but he's still averaging basically 20 and 10 on the year, still shooting 40% from three-point range. I think if Vooch came to Golden State, these numbers would go way up, and I think the efficiencies would remain similar as well. Overall, this is where I think Golden State goes if there's no Butler trade or LaVine trade out there. If February 6th comes around and I'm live here at Warriors Today, if we get to 71,500 subscribers, of course, I think Vucevic trade could be very likely if they're out on Butler, they're out on LaVine. Those guys drive too high of a price for Golden State to make a trade for at this point. Vooch has been the guy, in my opinion, for a long time. I think that if either of those two do not work out and either side can't come to an agreement, they will shift their focus to Vooch. What would a trade for Vooch look like? Clearly a lot less than what you have to give up for LaVine or Butler. You get Vooch and Torrey Craig in my trade ID here for Moses Moody, Kyle Anderson, Looney, and a second-round pick. Listen, Moody has played good in the absence of a couple of players on Golden State's roster, Kuminga, Draymond, but he's still struggling to find a solidified role in Steve Kerr's rotation. So I think he could be expendable here, even though they did give him a contract extension before the season started. It just doesn't seem to be working out long-term for Moses Moody, even though he has given you guys some good minutes over the past couple of games and the past couple of weeks with these injuries. I think they'd be willing to part with him if Vooch was in tow. But with that being said, we've named the top three guys. We've talked about all the latest updates with the top three guys. If there's somebody else out there, you can name them as well. But name your number one Warriors trade target for me down in the comments section. Who is your guy? I'm trying to hear what Dub Nation has to say. We can talk about it more at Smitty at CS on Twitter. Hit me up over there. Trying to build a little bit more of a Warriors community. We're going to be talking trade. If the Warriors make a trade, I'll have you tapped in first over there. And like I said at the beginning of today's show, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. We're going to be live on the channel next week for the trade deadline, but we got to get to 71,500 subscribers first. If you love your Golden State Warriors, you'll love this channel. Hit that sub button. We'll see you in the next one. Let's go, Dubs.